My job right now is to introduce Carol Marin. So I'm a longtime Carol Marin fan, and I feel kind of weird reading her bio because I feel that everyone who's been in Chicago for any amount of time knows who Carol is, right? Carol is a reporter, and she works as political editor at NBC5. She's a regular interviewer for public broadcasting on WTTW's Chicago Tonight, and most recently she serves as director of the DePaul University Center for Journalism Integrity and Excellence. I can go on and on and on about Carol bringing us political news and good, solid political news. I'm not going to detain the time any longer. I'm going to ask both Carol and Dr. Maimon to come up, and then Carol will continue on with Dr. Maimon.
Thank you so much. In response, though, I must say, everybody does not know me because sometimes they think I'm Marianne Ahern. And so in the newsroom, Marianne will come in and say, got 3 high Carols today, and I'll say, I got 4 high Mariannes. So, you know, sometimes it's not quite as clear as we think it is. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here today. And to be beside Elaine Maimon. This is her biography. It goes on and on and on and on, so I'm not going to read all of it. Suffice it to say that she is an author, an educator, president of Governors State University, and really has transformed that institution. Before that, chancellor of the University of Alaska, vice president at Arizona State. Her accomplishments are too long to list and still find a way to get you back to your offices. And one of the things that we will discuss, but not just immediately, Leading Academic Change, which is her latest book, which really attempts to put our collective arms around some of the major problems in education and how we solve what sometimes seems to be insoluble. Along the way, write your questions, and I will try to answer or have Elaine answer as many as possible. But because I am a news person, let's just start, Elaine, with the news of the day, and that is that the president of Southern Illinois University, it was reported today by Downstate Press, talked to his faculty and students and said, you know what? Southern Illinois University is going to have to shrink its footprint. That's pretty frightening news, isn't it?
Well, I think that what's frightening is that sometimes we're not looking at the really expansive role of public higher education. Shrinking's not a great word. What I would argue, Carol, is that we have a new majority of students. We tend to think of the old majority, upper middle class, students who are coming right from high school. The new majority of students in higher education today are first generation, students of color, adults, and veterans. And those students have been underserved always. They're underserved now. And it's really, what's really important is for public higher education in particular to recognize how significant it is to rethink programs, rethink what we're doing so that we are serving this new majority of students.
At the same time, you now are a veteran of the funding battlefields of Illinois, and you understand better than anybody that Illinois is now considered the second largest exporter of students to other universities and other colleges. And that outflow is very hard to reverse and sort of rectify what's been ruined. How do you do that?
Well, it certainly didn't help to have an unprecedented budget stalemate for over 2 years, sending messages all over the United States that since the public universities were in that unprotected 10%, you know that 90% of the budget in Illinois went forward. But in the 10% that did not, were the public universities. And the message that was sent was very damaging. And so it's really up to us now to do everything we possibly can, first of all, for the government to invest in higher education, to understand how bad it is for the state when they don't, and then for all of us in higher education to make sure that what we're doing in higher education really does serve the citizens of Illinois.
You and I both know that there is a huge push. We hear it from our mayor, we hear it from other elected officials, that our schools need to train students for jobs. How are you on that?
Well, that's absolutely true. It's very important that we prepare students for fulfilling careers, but that's only part of the job. It's an important one. And I think for every kind of higher education institution, liberal arts colleges, public universities, flagships, we have to be very attuned to the need for students to have fulfilling careers.
But can I interrupt you here? Because career is different than job, isn't it?
Yes.
And so the idea that you go to a major employer and say, what do you need? And the employer says, I need 7,500 digitally sophisticated welders. Is that going to have longevity in a decade to follow for that person trained in that specific job?
No. Already, welding is being taken over by robotics. Already. And if you talk to welders, they will tell you that. And so one of the false narratives is that higher education in the 21st century should be preparing students for a first job. I don't know how many of you in the audience remember way back when people were using computers and they were punching cards for the computers, and the big career was key punch operators. Does anybody remember that? And of course, where are those key punch operators today if they were not provided with the kind of education that allows you to move from one job to another and to do the kind of career planning that is necessary? So this emphasis on a first job is just very benighted.
So what do you do when that, in fact, is a narrative down in Springfield?
Well, you do everything you can to change it. And, you know, I think being here, having your interest from the media perspective, I think that we do need to change the narrative. And we need to make sure that for the good of Illinois, that we really are asking our higher education institutions to prepare students for the 21st century.
So in your book, Elaine and I both happen to be recovering English teachers. And so I started my career as a teacher in high school English. Elaine is much more accomplished along these lines and has gone far further with her degrees. But in your book, I'm fascinated by your emphasis not on technical training so much as word training. Will you explain what your theory is?
Well, I think everyone understands that we really are in a knowledge revolution. Information exchange, which some may have assumed was the role of higher education and educational along, click of a key, you can get any information you want. My husband and I were, trying to remember the lyrics to an old musical comedy song called Jubilation Tea Corn Pone. Don't ask why. But in any case, click. We got all the lyrics right there. Exchange of information, it cannot be what education is all about anymore. And so what we need to do, the real reform in higher education, isn't necessarily shrinking footprints or thinking about whether we have boards of regents or not. It's a teaching and learning revolution where our emphasis is on teaching students when they click that key and they get a piece of information, they must evaluate it. Is it a lie? Where does it come from?
No, not fake news.
Oh, well, there you go. They have to be able to identify fake news and not let anybody else tell them what is fake and what is actual. They need to have the intellectual capacity themselves, to be able to judge a piece of information, to see whether it is fake or not, and then to connect the dots. one piece of information with another piece of information. And then finally, to take all of that and apply it, often in situations that look very different from the situation in which they learned it.
So at DePaul, we have students who are studying journalism. They went home for Thanksgiving, and their parents, some of them said, "What are you doing with this? This is a dying profession." Words, functionally, are kind of a dying profession. My own father, a million years ago, said, "Could you please date an engineer because they know how to do something as opposed to say something?" In your book, when you talk about writing across a curriculum, you're not talking about a course, and you're not talking about whether you're a chemistry major or an engineering major. You're really talking about something that we do not do in our universities really much at all, correct?
Well, it's getting better. I think ever since the beginning of the Writing Across the Curriculum movement in the late 70s, early 80s, we've done better, but we have to do much better.
So what is it, I mean, define it. What does that mean? Because for a lot of us, even those of us who know how to read some educationese, it isn't clear.
Well, I think that, first of all, we must, in higher education, communicate with the public, not in educationese. That's one of the important things that we want students to learn, that you have to be able to figure out the situation, your purpose, and making sure that people understand what you're saying. So let's take the journalism example. The fact is that, yes, the newspaper at the doorstep, in print, that may be going away. But the principles of journalism, as we access different newspapers through technology and blogs and other sources, the principles of journalism haven't changed in terms of integrity, the terms of multiple sources, all of the things that you teach at the center in DePaul. They have never been more important, to the extent that at Governor State University, for example, and we've been inspired by DePaul and by Carol, we're starting a community media center, and one of the things that we're doing is doing media across the curriculum, so that students in our freshman composition classes are being asked to cover local news in the south suburbs, cover things at the university. That doesn't mean they're all going to be journalists. It's going to mean that they will be media consumers. They will know more about how to tell a story when it's important to them that people understand it.
But what does that have to do with the success or the future of a geology major, an architecture major? What does that do for them in the long run educationally?
Well, Writing Across the Curriculum is really the first of the movements in higher education that has looked at what I call the infusion model. And that is, for everything you want students to know and do, you don't need a separate course. You need to infuse across the curriculum perspectives. So with writing, there isn't a course you can name where the student later on in a career will never have to write anything. And even more so now than before. And that means we used to call them genres, types of writing, and you think of fiction, poetry. No, now it's Twitter, now it's Facebook, now it's social media, as well as memos and other forms of writing. And we are committed at Governor State University to teaching students that kind of versatility, so that whatever their major, whether it's geology, or whether it's history, or whether it's business, that they will be able, when it's important for them to make a point, and often you make points through stories, to tell a story, they will be capable of doing that. And that is absolutely a 21st century skill.
So let's go back to the new majority student, because there is an argument in, I think, many quarters that says if you're going to attract students, you want to attract the smartest. You want merit-based funding of students that will make your institution better, stronger, make America stronger, versus need-based students. Where do you fall on that?
Well, I think it's a false dichotomy, because I'll just give you some statistics. In the last 3 years, by the way, these stats are from the National Educational Clearinghouse. You can check them. And, you know, for us, at Governor State University, the National Educational Clearinghouse will tell you, any university, who are your biggest competitors. They will tell you where the students that you admitted as fully qualified, where did they go? Now, I won't ask you to guess because we don't have the time, so I'm going to tell you that at Governor State University, our biggest competitor is nowhere. 200 students every year, 34% of the students who go elsewhere that we admit do not go to community college, do not go to a private institution, do not go out of state. They go nowhere. And that loss of human capital is something that Illinois should be as worried about as the students who do go out of state. And I have to say that I'm very proud of the working group in Springfield, Democrats, Republicans, House, Senate. They came together last year and they brought us at the universities in and people at various jobs in the universities just to figure out, to listen to us, to figure out what we needed. And so they are now saying that they're worried about students who go elsewhere and nowhere. And let me just also give you another stat. Northern Illinois University is much larger than we are. And 1,000 students that Northern admits every year, qualified, go nowhere.
So, do you talk to Bessie DeVos much?
I haven't had the pleasure, no.
Well, I was just curious, so she is the Secretary of Education, obviously. What's the interface between the Trump administration's work around education and your work as the president of a state university?
Well, I am on the board of the American Council of Education, which is the umbrella group that oversees all of higher education in the nation and is the major lobbying group. So what I do know from there is that it could be a whole lot worse in terms of the federal area because so far the national agenda has not diminished what we call Pell grants. Those are the federal need-based grants that come to students for certain income levels, and that's why students have to fill out what's called the FAFSA form. So everybody in the audience, if you know anybody who is thinking of going to college next year, no matter what their income level, have them fill out that form. It's really important. It's the base for all kinds of aid. So they haven't done anything to that yet. In fact, they actually have extended it so we can have students use FAFSA in the summer. So we kind of hold our breath. American Council of Education does a very good job with working with people who are the career Department of Education people who may not be immediately affected by DeVos. And, we just try to manage with that. I will say this. That during the budget crisis in Illinois, fiscal...
Like it's over?
Am I glad it's over?
No, it is. It sounds like
it's over?
Like it's over?
Well, it has a half-life.
Okay.
There's no question about that. But I will tell you that in fiscal year 16, when we didn't get a penny from the state of Illinois in appropriations, fiscal year starts July 1st, not a penny till April 22nd, and then a 70% cut. 70% cut. I mean, this hasn't happened in any of the 50 states in the whole history of public higher education. I mean, I don't know if you all realize how disgraceful that was, but that year in particular, we were basically funded by Pell grants. I mean, we were, we do our operating budget based on appropriation and then on tuition. And the tuition that was covered by the Pell grants was really sustaining us. So in terms of federal policy, I think basically, we have to continue, tell the story, hold our breath, wait for 2 years, do whatever we can. I think there are things that can be done right now in the state of Illinois that can really set a positive example, as we move forward through the next 2 years.
Like what?
Well, I think that, again, the working group that is chaired by Senator Pat McGuire, last year, they did this good delving into really understanding us at the universities instead of trying to bash us and slash us, which was kind of the mode before. And they then came up with some legislation. It was small legislation, which helped. There was some modification in the procurement rules.
There are 4 bills, right?
Yeah. And, so that was good because, see, here's the problem. Whenever a state treats its public universities like state agencies, it's bad. It's bad. Of course we want to be in procurement, buying and selling. Of course we need to be have oversight. There's no question about it. But what you do is you look at best practices for procurement oversight at other public universities in other states. You don't impose on us, what the Department of Water and Sewer or whatever is doing. It just doesn't work. And so that was helpful.
I'm glad you brought that up. Because, this is Illinois. And so I wonder, as the president of a university, has the phone ever rung from someone with political connections who said, I have a friend who needs a job?
And I will tell you very honestly, and I've had the same answer in 3 states, Alaska, Arizona, and Illinois. And here in Illinois, it happened before Clout Goes to College that the Tribune covered so effectively. And my answer was always, and it's usually a little more subtle. It's, oh, I was on your website and I just need more information. And so the first response is, well, let me make sure you have the right information. We'll send you the link. And so, and then it goes on. And finally, what I have said here, as well as 2 other states where I've been, and it is absolutely essential, in my view, in terms of universities and how we need to behave. I've said, sir, happened to be a sir.
Was it a senator?
I won't go into anything further. I just want you to know that by protecting our policies and practices, we are protecting all your constituents. And by the way, we're protecting you. And I think so long as a president is consistent, and another thing, it's been my rule, and I advise aspiring presidents to do the same, and I think those who have been successful listen to it, and that is you have to stay out of partisan politics. Of course, everything we do is political in the larger term, but you have to stay out of partisan politics. I have never, in 3 states, made a contribution to a political candidate, gone to a political rally that requires a contribution, and I am totally consistent on it. The one time that I were to lapse would be death. And in Arizona and in Alaska, and to some extent in Illinois, it's been respected. Now, what I have said to elected officials is that if you help us, and I just said thank you to Pat McGuire because he helped us, I will thank you lavishly and publicly. But I won't make contributions to your campaigns, and I won't do any kind of partisan campaigning.
Well, the thanks is an Illinois tradition, too, but the money helps. So, speaking of money, as a former teacher, and looking at salaries, and looking at universities, adjunct faculty are being hired more and more in many places at hideously low salaries, even though they may have multiple graduate degrees. I know of one adjunct who cobbled together 4 adjunct jobs and still made more money as a waitress. I'm wondering if salaries for higher education are driving really qualified or inspired educators away from our schools.
Well, you know from the book that I believe very firmly that that the first undergraduate year for students must be taught by full-time faculty at regional publics. At the flagships, they need to be preparing graduate students to be full-time at our universities. But at regional publics, liberal arts colleges, you have to have full-time people, the best minds on campus, really focused on that incredibly challenging year. The way we use adjuncts is really, I think, in a very responsible way. We have a number of professional programs. We have to have people in physical therapy and in business coming in part-time after their working day and helping our students be in touch with what is going on in the world in public administration and other fields. That's a responsible way to use adjuncts. For universities to ask fully qualified PhDs who are, supposed to do the freshman courses, but they're on the highway for most of the time because they have to be at more than one place. That is irresponsible, and I would say that loud and clear. I think it also goes back to I'm also asking for reform in PhD programs, especially in my field of English and in the humanities, where the PhD programs have to have better respect and not be so snobbish about a student who is really interested in connecting research and teaching. That is an important way that we're going to improve education across the country. And by the way, at Governor's State, we don't have a separate category for faculty who are teaching specialists and they're full-time, but they don't do research. We really are asking our best minds on campus who are teaching the freshmen to do research about teaching freshmen. And we've actually, they've been coming up with some really groundbreaking kinds of research that the nation as a whole could benefit from, because that freshman year is such an important transition year. And if we don't get it right then even those students who decided not to go nowhere and decided to come to us, they'll leave us. And they'll leave us without a degree, and they'll leave us without being educated, with the new majority students being educated the way they need to be.
So 2 more quick questions. If you have blue slips, send them forward. What has shocked you most in your time in Illinois?
Well, I have to say that what has shocked me most, and remember, I've been in public higher education for a long time. I started out in private, and so I know bureaucracy. I was at Queens College, City University of New York. I've been at Arizona State, University of Alaska Language. I've never seen so much bureaucracy as I've seen here, quite frankly. Just never, ever. I thought New York was the worst, but Illinois has surpassed New York. Just the way that money is spent that is away from the students, and that's my point of judgment. Money in the state should be as close to the students and educating the students as possible. When you're supporting elaborated bureaucracies of this and that and so forth and so on, it's a shock. Yeah.
So from Sylvia Jenkins. Sylvia, where are you?
Hi, Sylvia, one of our partners.
President of Moraine Valley
Yes.
Community College. No question from Sylvia, just to thank you for being a good partner with community colleges and the students we serve, specifically the dual degree program.
Yes, and I really want to give a shout out to other community college partners who are here, because we do have a wonderfully structured 4-year undergraduate program that you've heard me talk a little bit about, but we are just as proud of the pathways that we've developed with 17 community colleges in the Chicagoland area. We are especially committed to our suburban colleges, including Moraine Valley, but we have probably our largest number of students transferring from the city colleges of Chicago. And so that's another really important point in terms of regionalism, that I think is important to look at Governor's State as part of the whole complex of universities that serve Chicago as well as the suburban areas. Our dual degree program has also been recognized by the Kresge Foundation, and they have asked us to spread the word. They've given us money to have community college and 4-year university partners come to our campus to learn how we do it. I don't think that's recognized enough about the things that Illinois is doing really well. Last summer, we had a team from University of California, Santa Cruz, from Rollins College in Florida, and from Northern Arizona University in the Maricopa Community College District. So thank you, Sylvia, and you were one of our original partners, and appreciate your bringing that to the attention of the City Club.
From Jennifer Burrows. Jennifer, where are you? Given the population of students that you serve at Governor's State, what are you doing to help your students get jobs, internships, full-time apprenticeships, et cetera? Are you increasing resources and funding in this space?
Yes, again, the feds came through for us. We have a $2 million Title III grant, as it's called, that has allowed us to launch what we call the Center for the Junior Year. Now, that doesn't mean it's just for juniors. It's a way to become a junior. Junior year is when you really are in your major. The Center for the Junior Year reaches out to freshmen and sophomores, not only at University Park on our campus, but at our partner community colleges, to help them to make a selection of a major, think through, we always say mission before major. Figure out what you want to do in life, and then there are a lot of majors that'll fit that. And then we want them to be aware immediately of internships, and we're very much focused on making sure that every student who wants one gets an internship before graduating. We also work with Parker Dewey, which is this wonderful organization that has these project-based online internships paid. All of our internships have to be paid, given the population of our students.
And it's a scandal not to pay interns.
That's right.
May I say?
Thank you. And in any case, this is something we want to be doing more of, where the student can do a project, get paid a few $100s, do the project 2 or 3 weeks. It's an online project, and then have it on the resume. So we are thinking every minute of how we can help students connect, whatever they're studying. We also have some help from a local foundation called Liberal Education and Career Preparation, because we're also very committed to making sure our history majors and our English majors are students who, when they graduate, are going to be employed in fulfilling jobs. I'll give you one example of how this works. You know, I was an English major, love being an English major. So in literature, you learn how to analyze voice and purpose in short stories, you know, voice, character, all that. Now, what does that have to do with anything you can make a living with? Well, we show students, for example, that it's the same skills that you use for analyzing a video of a focus group. You're analyzing character, you're analyzing voice, you're making conclusions. So it's making those connections between what students are learning in an academic setting to how they apply it, and then giving them the chance to practice it. So that is what Governor State is very, very committed to.
Okay, so this is the speed dating round, because
Okay,
we
all
have
right.
5 minutes
Okay,
left,
good.
okay? So Vincent Williams asks, and this, I think, is just pretty much a yes or no. You think internships are still a gateway to careers?
Yes.
Okay. Kate Benson, the Chicago Network, you're always innovating. What are you going to do at GSU over the next few years? This is going to be a short answer.
Okay. Well, very short. I mentioned the Community Media Center, which we're very excited about. We're also, the faculty are researching the effect of trauma, long-term trauma, food and housing insecurities on students' learning. And for us to become aware of that and how we can better address it.
Cynthia Shannon Hutchinson of Northwestern asks, what do you see as the best way forward to fund public education? I'd be curious what you think concretely can be done there, and decrease student debt. Is there a fiscal mechanism in your head about this?
Well, yeah. I mean, the state and the state of Illinois has to provide us with sufficient investment, given all that's at stake. That's the main thing that has to happen.
Where does the money come from?
Well, I think that it's always a question of priorities. And, you know, basically, you have all these students going nowhere and not becoming the taxpayers that they would become if they were educated. You're losing money. So there has to be a way of looking at all of this so that higher education is an investment.
We're lucky to have you. Elaine Maimon of Governor State.